Hey everyone, and welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast, where we talk to geniuses throughout the commercial real estate and building automation industries, asking them how they've gotten where they are, who's walked alongside them, and how they're helping others along the way. This is episode 9 of season 1, and I'm your host, Tim Vogel. In today's episode, we're speaking with Paul Valente of Chicago Public Schools. Hey Paul, welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tim. I appreciate the invite and look forward to chatting with you.
First and foremost, you are a building genius. There's no doubt about it.
I'll take it.
I think you've seen a little bit of everything that's out there. And just by the nature of your role and the organization you work for, you continue to see everything that is out there and anything that's been deployed like in the last 80 years.
If not older, there's quite a bit that we've seen. Yeah.
So Paul, why don't you start off, just tell us a little bit about what you do for CPS and how long you've been there.
I'd be going on a total of about 22 years at this point with CPS. My current title is the Facility Automation Architect. Fancy jumbling of words. Essentially, I'm in charge of the BAS and IoT subsystems for CPS. Been doing this now for a little over 4 years, and basically came to this completely contrary to how normal people, I guess, would come to this role, because I'm on the IT vertical. So I know we'll probably get into a little bit more in depth in a little bit, but it's been a very interesting ride. And then, Tim, to your point, I have seen just about everything there ever has been with controls throughout with my tenure in this role, because our average age of our buildings this year is 82 years old. So we have steam engines, we have high pressure boiler systems. I was in a tunnel this morning for what's called a Deaver style building with a giant paddle wheel fan, and tunnel, and it actually had cooling down there, so that was kind of interesting. There's all sorts of wild stuff, and I love it because this is like the inner geek in me loves seeing like how all these buildings are constructed, and you can see, all the mechanical systems and all that. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of buildings too. I mean, every one you go to has to be different and unique. And, obviously there's learnings from one to the other, but I mean, tell us about some of the other sort of unique things that you've seen in some of those buildings.
Oh man, it's wild. So, I mean, my favorite hobby when I go and do walkthroughs is on my Instagram thing. I post like dog photos because I'm a big dog lover. But my other favorite thing is walking around the basements and finding a creepy chair, because we have these very large basements, and there's inevitably a creepy chair off in a corner somewhere, usually in an unexcavated area of the building. But we see like pretty much everything from the beginning of controls, starting with coal and oil-fired systems, all the way up to pneumatics, into the beginning semblances of DDC, with some of like the original Landis and Gear, Robert Shaw systems, the DMS stuff that's out there. First generation, more modern controls, all the way into the most recent stuff. I mean, just from a numbers standpoint, so the audience knows, we have 1,120 distinct physical structures within CPS's portfolio. So we're the third largest school district in the nation. We would probably be closer to like the second if we included all the suburbs, sort of like how LA Unified and New York do. We don't, so it's just the Chicago city proper, for that. But I mean, 65 plus million square feet that we manage, variety of different vendors for temperature controls contractors. In our spec, just for everybody's awareness, we have 6 named vendors for us. So there's a lot. I mean, I think right now on our enterprise supervisors, we have, it was something like 170 buildings cut over to those supervisors. And we've been doing a lot of work with a variety of other software tools in order to calculate points. So far, we're about halfway through auditing the points on the supervisors, and we're over 250,000 points. Factor in the rest of the buildings. But we have a little bit of everything. I mean, we got magnetic levitating chillers to regular, um, like window shakers, that are there. I mean, you got all sorts of boiler systems and pretty much every different shape and size and configuration and all sorts of wacky stuff. So
Here's a trick question, Paul. How do you keep track of all that?
it's tough. I mean,
Like, is it a
so
big Excel spreadsheet or?
well, in seriousness, we use a tool called Smartsheets. So it started with an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet. For those who were Google shops, we did everything with that. We had one very large spreadsheet that was our audit of all of our stuff before I formally took this role, and then we combined in other data sources into it, and then we were looking at it and we're like, this is just way too much data to live in a spreadsheet, especially with the amount of confidential information, passwords and IPs and all that kind of stuff in there. So we've started to segment that off, and then we use Smartsheets as our project management tool internally. So we have project documents for all of our projects that we do with each temperature controls contractor. We also use it for internal budget analysis, variety of other things. But then we also still have spreadsheets. But how we keep track of it, I mean, it mainly through Smartsheets. And then we're the district through facilities is implementing WebTMA as its tool du jour for PM management and assignments. So the ultimate goal, and hopefully the next year or two, is to implement a CMMS in order to capture all of the data of all the assets that we have. So we have sort of a central repository for like warranty information and all that kind of stuff, as-built and documents and such. But it's a chore. There's a lot.
Yeah, I am always absolutely amazed with how you guys, just keep track of those things. I mean, the question was a half joke, but the way you answered it, like, I just so love it, because it's like, there is so much to keep track of, and you guys are really trying to nail down the minutia of all of it, and really, you can't standardize everything that's in your buildings, but you could standardize the processes of how you document it. And that is a chore and a task, but you guys are taking it with a smile on your face, and I that's one of the reasons I love working with you.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge.
It is, yes, boy. Let's now go back to, what's your traditional training or schooling around?
Oh, geez. So initially, I have an undergraduate in computer science and math. And I got that partly. I never wanted to go to college. So I'll just give you guys some personal information. My current wife, my only wife that I have, wife number one.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
I'm still married to. She and I were blind dates in high school for prom, and we started dating after that, and things got a little bit more real as we were graduating, and she sort of half jokingly said, I'm not going to be with anybody who doesn't go to college. I originally wanted to be a machinist and go off into the trades, because I went to a trade school here in CPS that had like a trades program, really liked machining, thought that was going to be a great thing. She's like, well, I'm not going to be with anybody who doesn't go to college. And I was like, oh, crap. All right, now I got to go to college. So I went to junior college first, because I was paying for it all out of pocket, and then went to and got my undergraduate in computer science and math. I've been an IT person for a long time. And during that course of going through and doing that, I started teaching in an alternative high school. And at the time, in the alternative high schools, you could teach without a college diploma as long as you had or were working on that degree in college. And I, in the beginning, was a horrible teacher. Any teacher who says they're great right out of the gate, they're full of crap. It takes years to learn. But through that process and through the school that I was part of, I ended up getting my master's in secondary education with a specialty in special ed. So I did that, and at the same time was director of IT for the community center that was part of the school system that I was at. And that's sort of my foray into professional life. I give a longer, walk through the 20-something years or whatnot, but ended up the nickel tour has ended up leaving the charter system that I was part of, mainly because the benefits were really crappy and the pay was real low to go into CPS officially. The charter system is sort of the bastard offshoot of CPS for students who were, permanently expelled from the traditional high school way of things for a variety of reasons. So then got into CPS officially, was a tech coordinator, wanted to move beyond the school, so went to the central office. I was the Windows guy, Chromebook guy for the district, managing all the Windows and Chromebooks. Then I went and did managed services, so built out a managed services team. And then the opportunity came up with being in charge of all the BAS. And I was like, this is an interesting turn of fate. How hard can it be?
Yeah.
And it's not that bad, MSTP, that's just like modem communication. I mean, it's not going to be hard. And it is an incredible world, controls. And I love it. I mean, I love this field, and I legitimately love this job, doing what I'm doing. So it's a great thing.
Isn't it? It's very rewarding, right? I mean, to be able to say that you love the job you have. I think that's awesome. So
yeah.
And you went to Chicago Public Schools, correct?
I did. Yeah. I started out in the Catholic schools till about 7th grade, then transitioned to a CPS elementary school, Stone Scholastic Elementary, and then went to Lane Technical High School. Lane Tech, for those not Chicago aware, is now our largest school within CPS. It's 750,000 square feet, 4 floors. I think it's about 5,000 students. So, average size school for most of the, cities in the nation. But it's a beautiful building, and that's where I graduated. And my wife and I and many others went to Lane. So, product of the system.
Yeah. And while you were there, you probably thought, I'm going to work for this organization someday.
No, I never. My father was a teacher. My mother was a social worker. My father was a teacher in CPS, and I never wanted to follow suit. Hence why I wanted to be a machinist. But it's a funny turn of fate that I end up going into teaching and, doing that, and then, moving in the central office and all that kind of stuff. But it's, I would say to young folks, never say you're never going to do anything in your life, because you'll never know how the path of life sort of takes twists and turns along the way.
It sure does. Yeah. Opportunities arise. And, so this is episode 9. We've had 8 other episodes before this. I have been, kind of blown away by how many people are like, it was just by chance that, I got into the industry because so-and-so's dad, or, all of a sudden I was without a job and I needed something, and this is the first thing that came up, and now I've been here 20 years, and those stories just happen like so many times. That's just kind of how life is. How long were you a teacher?
12 years.
12 years teaching.
Yeah, I ended up working up to be the lead teacher at the site. I was going to go for, what's called Type 75 track to be assistant principal or principal. My whole outlook on professionalism, or my professional career, was I didn't want to work for a private company to make somebody rich. I wanted to work, I really liked working for the community center that I was a part of and the school system. And I wanted to affect change for students on a grand scale. Originally, I wanted to be the CIO of CPS. Now that I'm in central office, I don't want that job at all. I'll take like director position right underneath. It's about the same pay. But yeah, no. And so every change I've done and pivot that I've done in my career with the board, it's been, how can I get a larger audience and a larger effect for the district and make things better. And and whatever I'm managing, whatever I'm overseeing, how can I make it better? How can I improve process? How can I improve workflow? With that, and that's sort of it. But I'm not sure if I told you how I actually got the BAS job.
No,
we might have talked about this in passing, but a real quick story. So I was the managed services team lead, building a managed services team. And a group of the team that I was on was going off and getting certified in an Apple management piece of software called Jamf. So I was like, well, I should probably go off and do it because we had some free credits. So I was at my Jamf course, and the final day of the class, which is like in the middle of winter in a snowstorm, we were having our assessment. And through the couple weeks leading up to that, the CIO at the time was like, we recognize that there's nobody managing the BAS systems, that these are an issue for the district from a compliance standpoint, because you have all these like quote unquote servers that exist that aren't being patched, aren't locked down with our approved tools. There's all sorts of things there. Plus, then you have all the litany of issues with the actual control systems not being managed or maintained. Up until recently, we didn't have maintenance agreements, didn't have service agreements and things like that with our vendors. So we operated at fail, essentially. And he's like, we really need somebody to manage this and oversee it and everything like that. And so right as I'm about to walk into to take my test, the CIO calls my personal cell and is like, hey, Paul, I got the position that I'm going to open up to manage the BAS stuff. And I think you're the guy for it. Tell me right now, do you want this job? And I was like, this guy's name is Phil, who's the CIO. I was like, Phil, thank you for thinking of me. Yes, I do. I think this would be a great job. I definitely want to take it and explore this option. He's like, great. You're my guy for this. And I'm like, okay.
Okay.
Didn't know what I was getting into. And then I went and took my test and passed it, but I was like, oh, that's it's an interesting, turn of events.
Yeah.
You're not sure how, everything pops up and all that.
No. And so did you have any idea that job was even going to be coming up, or that the opportunity was going to be coming up?
No. We were talking originally that somebody needs to manage it, because typically it's a facility managed effort. But because of the amount of IT focus that we have, with all the computers and the servers and things like that, the CIO thought it was best to have it on the IT side versus having it over on the facility side, since we would have all of the infrastructure supports, with whoever leads it. And he got approval. He apparently sold it up to senior leadership, got approval to open up a position, and put me in it. So I was like, all right, I'll do it.
Wow. Did you know anything about controls, really? Like going into this
No. I knew the very minimal thing. Like, I knew of BAS systems and sort of what they did. We were actually, through prior positions, helping out schools with new building engineers coming on who couldn't log into the computer, the BAS computer. So we'd go out there and help break into them. But how they were set up with all the industry, how it's laid out, knew none of that. I thought to myself, I'm like, how hard can this be?
Yeah.
This can't be that bad. I mean, I always sort of joked with folks that, if I take this job, all I have to do is fix one site, and then I look great, because we haven't fixed any of them for 30 years. So
right.
If I fix one, then I'm doing my job.
Yeah, the bar's pretty low.
Exactly. The bar was really low. But that's not my mentality. I like to... I professionally wanted to make sure I could make an impact, learn as much as I can, get as much knowledge, soak it in, and surround myself with folks who can help support that. And originally only had, really one person who was helping me out, a master commissioning agent. And then now I have a larger team with a couple of EORs on board, as well as other contractual services, and now an FTE as well too. So.
Yeah,
working out. I must be doing something right, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I will say that being on a CPS call is really absolutely fascinating. First of all, there's so many people on it. Like all of the key stakeholders are there. All of the shareholders are there, if you will. Any decision you make and everyone that it's going to affect is there, and it's just a huge effort around communication. Making sure that everyone's clear what the expectations are and what was done. And, I credit a lot of that to you, because, you ask a lot of sort of penetrating questions during those, and everyone is then held accountable to give a good answer. And if there's not a good answer, then it's like, you better be able to follow up and, follow up quickly. So, you've mentioned this before. I'd love for you to talk about it a little bit. How has your teaching experience, your 12 years, affected how you kind of take on a role like the one you're in now?
For an owner like myself, you have to be organized. And if you're not an organized person, you're going to have a really tough job of managing a large portfolio. I mean, it's sort of obvious. You got to be a relatively organized person. I fancy myself as being organized. People have described me as being hyper-organized. I will take that. I don't see myself as being hyper-organized, but I always rely on what I learned as a teacher of how can we make this better? How can we better the workflow that we're doing, the process, the communication, the engagement, and the calls that we're on now with the team are dramatically different than the calls that would have happened 3 years ago. We have entirely different process workflow, different documentation that we've gone through, and all of it that's been doing is because we've been doing this reflection internally and put in a lot of postmortem work on jobs and saying, okay, we went through this process. These were our pain points. This is what we need to tweak to make it better. Can we tweak it to make it better? And will it actually affect the outcome of what we're doing? So I think, and that can be applied to anything, like any kind of process or process improvement workflow. And then it's how do you track the changes that you're doing so that way you can show that to leadership or HR or whoever is overseeing what you're doing. And then also, in my view, make everything as public as you can. So within CPS, within our facilities team, within our IT team, everything is public to them. So anybody on the facility side, anybody in the IT side, we have a very extensive dashboard. You've seen samples of this on some of our calls, where we lay out all our project plans. We have our financials for those who can view it. We have, are we meeting our SLAs and KPIs for our jobs? Are we on time, off time, that kind of thing. And I believe in trying to be as open as possible, because as soon as you start hiding stuff and you silo yourself in your vertical, you're not able to engage with others, and then they don't know what you're doing. So, for us, I think a lot of that is being transparent. And that harkens back to the teaching side of things. Back when you're a teacher, you can't teach in a silo, even if you're just even in high school. I was a computer science and math teacher in high school, and I was the only computer science and math teacher in my school. But I still have to engage with the other disciplines, because you need to take the content that's being taught in those areas and bring it into your content area as well. Even if some history lesson has not a whole lot to do with math, you can still incorporate parts of that or some of that history into your math teaching. So that way it ties it all together, and it's a little bit more uniform for the students. So I think to answer your question, I think the biggest thing that I take from teaching is being organized, and bring that into what I do right now, and in everything I do, but into controls. Yeah.
Well, and I think transparency really is key. This idea of nothing hidden. We're all working together. We all have the same goal because we've stated that goal. We've stated that vision, and knowing that, there's no reason for anyone to pretend like we're something we're not, or that we know something we don't. So, ask the question, be open-handed, and ultimately, again, it goes back to that mission and vision and the why of what we do. So you've mentioned a couple of things that I think are interesting. You've mentioned that you're a dog lover, and and anyone that's been on a call, perhaps with you, has seen lovingly a dog in a diaper walking behind you. But then you also talked about you just had this desire to affect positive change for students. So you seem to have this kind of care and concern for other creatures or other people outside of yourself. Where do you think some of that comes from?
Oh, I attribute that to my parents. My parents are staunch hippies, growing up, and we stuck true to the hippie sort of goals of no violence. So I didn't have any GI Joes growing up, or Transformers, or He-Man, or any of that kind of stuff. I also didn't have television because there was too much violence on some of the shows that was on TV, and they didn't want to expose that to me as a young age. All that. But their big thing was also the same motto that I use. It's you shouldn't try to work for. We feel that you should try to work for the benefit of society, and seeing what you can do to make the world better and everybody happier and more cohesive. And depending on whatever your skill sets are, if you can land a gig in that profession based on the skills that you have or the skills that you want to derive, try to do it and see if you can do something that's positive. I don't fault people who just want to go out and make money too. So if that's your thing, God bless. But my sort of family's sort of motto is let's see what we can do for everybody at large and holistically for folks. So
No, yeah, I think that's great. You work for an organization. This pretty much anything I say could be argued, and that's fine. But you work for an organization that's a school district, and what is one of the more noble things that government can do than to help aid in the education and the bringing up of the next generation. And you get to kind of help facilitate that by managing the facilities.
yeah. I mean, the facility motto is warm, cool, safe, and dry buildings. So I can help on the warm, cool, and dry. Safe is more safety and security, but at least with those three, I can assist. And I think it's one of those things where if you look at education, when I was at Lane, for instance, we didn't have any kind of central air conditioning. Actually, I still don't have central air. They had window shakers. But I was there before they had shakers. And so you had, I remember sitting up on the fourth floor of this building in the middle of summer with the lights off, the windows open, and a box fan in the window to stay cool. And you're just sweating, buckets of water. And it's not a conducive environment to learn. So you need to have a conditioned space, especially now with, COVID and the new reality of verifying of indoor air quality and making sure that are you having constant air being pushed in your spaces, the right amount of air, filtered air? Are you monitoring, all of the pollutants that are in the spaces and then alarming if you're getting anything too excessively high? I mean, this is all the world that we live in now. Is everything changed? And it used to be not a very sexy business to be in, the industry that we're in. I was getting into it, and it was a hard time getting money from leadership. But now, due to COVID, and and all this whole focus on making sure everything is working 100%, we're monitoring on it. It's great because COVID was horrible, but now the focus is what can we do on creating healthier spaces, in there, and then just keeping track of maintenance, repairs, upgrades, all that kind of business. So it's a big thing.
So I joined the industry about 6 years ago. And when COVID hit, that would have been 4 years into the industry. Then there was something I noticed, and that's sort of stuck with me. Working with you and your team was the legitimate and authentic concern for the most vulnerable students, including the special needs. There were entire schools or zones within schools, dedicated to these special needs kids. And I can remember it was at least, I think, 3 different team members that brought it up on phone calls, just, again, with this authentic concern. And that was just one of those, it was a realization for me. It's like, wow, these people aren't just doing their jobs. They're not just box checkers. Now, we all, check boxes from time to time, but at the core of what you were doing and what the concerns and the projects and the task at hand was, it came down to the safety of those most vulnerable students. And that left an impression in me, and that was a kind of a shaping moment for me.
Yeah. I mean, I've taught a lot of special needs students back in the day when I was teaching. We had a pretty large population of it, but yeah, that's a group that's near and dear to my heart. So when COVID was first rearing its head, that was one of our main focuses is, we have these vulnerable populations, medically fragile children, we have a number of dedicated special needs schools throughout the district. It's what do we do to make sure that their systems are working at 100%, and everybody is safe. We can monitor what's going on there, because for COVID, that was one of, even though kids were able to go home and do remote learning, those students need a lot of occupational health and training and assistance, really for some of their profound profound disabilities that are going on. And so being home wasn't a good option. So it's trying to get them back into the schools where we had all the supports, and then we have to figure out how we're going to do it safely. And make sure that, both the assistants, the teachers, and the students are all secure and safe, in the environment. So, and it's still one of my things that I focus dearly on. I mean, we're looking at, there's like I said, a variety of special needs schools throughout the district. So we have various alerts and alarms that differ then from some of the others, so that way we can respond a little bit quicker to them. So, yeah, but huge priority.
Yeah, and again, it being an authentic one is, I love it. It's wonderful, and it's something that's kind of, I said shaped, but it's really helped kind of put into focus that when we talk about occupants and tenants, it's not kind of the sterile idea of occupants and tenants. It's people, and just and putting the emphasis on that. Let's this is a great transition. Let's talk about people. Who are some of the people, Paul, that even going back to your teaching days, your IT days, that have kind of been influential to you in shaping the way you look at your career, the tasks at hand?
Well, I mean, I could be sappy, and I will be sappy. And I'll say my father first and foremost. And part of it is for a real quick story. Back in the 80s, he was one of the first people who got to work from home and had work provide a computer. So he was a fundraiser for the Knights of Columbus. And he worked remote, 100% remote from the house. And he got an 8086 computer, original PC, so to speak, that beige color and all that. And it was running, I believe, Windows 2.0 with DOS as a subsystem. And he brought this home, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I didn't have any video game systems. I didn't really have TV very much growing up. So it was like, computers. I can play video games. This is going to be awesome.
Yes.
So my dad is real supporting, and so he's like, go play around with it and whatever. And I promptly broke the system. Broke Windows, so it wouldn't auto load. This is way before you could really go get a for dummies book or something like that on how to do it. So rather than being like yelled at or whatever, my dad's like, well, this is a teachable moment. You broke it. Now it's your task to figure it out and figure out how you can fix it. And it took me a couple weeks, but then figured out, got a bunch of books from the library, was able to fix it, and then that began my journey into IT. But my high school computer science teacher, I think, would be one of my other, Howard Heath, one of my other sort of personal heroes. He ran the computer lab. He, like a couple weeks into my computer science class, I believe like sophomore year, he said, hey, I'm looking for volunteers who will help out at the lab after school hours. If anybody's interested, sign up. And I signed up. And I was like, what the heck? I want to do it. Volunteer, get out there. And he started my journey of understanding the whole methodology of break fix and understanding like sort of that mindset of thinking about a break fix mentality. And I think that initial training really sort of helped shape my professional trajectory, because I look at things from like an optimization and break fix kind of mentality of like, let's try to figure out what the problem is. Let's try to make it as simple as possible and compartmentalize each of the components to it, and then see what can we tackle now, what can we tackle later on, and what can we tackle in the future, and what can't we do. And then you just figure out where you move those components around. Whether you have resources for that, other people you can tap, or whatever it is that way. So they're my two people that I go to, for that kind of an answer.
Yeah. Is Howard still alive?
I believe so. I haven't chatted with him in years. And actually, funny story is the house that I moved from just recently, which was the second house I ever lived in, this is the third that I'm in right now, was on the same block that he lived on. And so I would occasionally see him on the street for the years that I lived in that neighborhood. But we'd say hi. I don't think he remembered me because it was many, many years after I was a high school student. But
all right. Well, Howard, if you're listening to the Building Geniuses podcast, Paul wants to take you out to dinner.
Yeah, reach out.
That's right. No, that's great. Yeah. So now you've been in this BAS role for a while. You said 4 years, right?
About 4 years at this point, yeah.
Yeah. Has there been anyone in particular that sort of helped you understand these building automation systems, or at least in the context of CPS?
Oh, yeah. There's a master commissioning agent. His first name is Dan. He is sort of the guy who knows everything in the history of everything. And you've met Dan. I'm not going to say his last name because I don't know if he wants to be public. But he's a building engineer for an incredibly long time within CPS, commissioning agent, has worked in like asbestos identification within the board. I mean, he's been basically most of his entire life with the Board of Ed, and just an absolute wealth of information. And he works on my team, works for me, and it's great to have him because like we'll walk into a building, but when I didn't know anything, I still don't know a whole lot. I mean, there's a tremendous amount that I still need to learn about. But he'll be able to walk in a building and rattle off the history of all sorts of things that we see. He used to actually, as an engineer, work on steam engines when we had him in the buildings and incinerators, and he would shovel coal as a fireman,
Yeah.
within the building. I mean, it was like he's done it all and seen it all, so it's pretty wild. So he's definitely somebody that has been super super helpful. I wouldn't be anywhere near where I'm at right now if it wasn't for him and the other folks that are in facilities who've given me this opportunity and support.
There are, first of all, I love Dan. Dan is he's a straight shooter. He is funny. He's got a quip. Oh man, like just waiting in the wings. And when he unleashes it, you're like, oh man, that was good. But yeah, I mean, he just has all this knowledge, and he seems to be one of the first people that we ask those questions to, or that I see get asked questions. There are so many guys like him across, go across buildings all around North America here that like just know everything. And one of the things that we were going to get a quote of this statistic. I just need to write it down so I actually get it. But we're losing some hundreds of thousands of years of experience like every week or every month to people retiring. And it's how do you capture some of that knowledge and how do you instill it? And one of the things that we found is like it just goes to asking questions. Ask questions that you don't even need to ask. You just want to ask, and you get so much information.
Well, I think that then also if the organization recognizes that talent and that person might be retiring because they just maybe don't want to turn a wrench anymore, or bend tin or something like that, maybe approach them about other alternatives of being a consultant. Dan, he's been a consultant now for a long time with us. He doesn't want to go and change valves anymore. He doesn't want to climb around in basements. But to have him, just to pay him to be on staff, to be able to bounce questions and scenarios off of is invaluable. And so like the executive director of facilities here for CPS, when it was questioned once about the money that we pay to contractually to get Dan, and the budget people were like, why do we need to pay for this guy? Like, why are we doing this? And they're like, this is like, no, we're paying for him. It was his thing. And there's no way you're going to get the amount of experience for as cheap as we're getting for this guy, who knows everything about CPS. So just cut the check, pay for this person's knowledge. There's a story of like it's different trades, but there's a common one that I see of like, a person calls out a ship repairer to repair an engine in the ship, and they bring out all these different contractors, and everybody is like, oh, it's going to be 1,000 hours, it's going to be 1,000,000 hours, it's going to be it's going to be all these obscene things, and in these huge money. And then they finally contact this one guy who's like the most respected person in the field. That guy comes out, he pulls out a little bitty hammer, taps it, in this one spot. And then everything works, and then hands over a bill for the same price as the other people. And they're like, well, why would I pay all this money? You just tap the hammer. And he's like, well, yeah, but I have the 40 years of knowledge to know where to tap the hammer.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think that analogy is very true with the folks who are getting close to retirement with all that knowledge. See how, if you can capture them and maybe give them a consultant's role, part-time thing, have them on staff so that way you can try to extract some of that knowledge the best you can, because there's a lot that are retiring, and it's like even in pneumatics, you look at the pneumatic field, huge amount of pneumatics that are out there, hardly anybody knows how to do it and work on these things, and it's like that's the true open source BAS right there, air powered.
It sure is, yeah. I made a joke about having a proprietary air pressure. No one else could use this air pressure. It's trademarked.
Yeah.
I wonder. I'm continuing to think about Dan and other people in their positions. Oh, going back to your analogy, I've also heard it's like, well, it was $50 to have me come out here, but yeah, it was $950,000 to know where to hit it. That you can't just pick those things up. And it's not even about paying your dues even. It's just about, it takes time to learn things. And you have a very unique perspective in the role that you're in, and you know that, coming from the IT background, and now you're going into what we lovingly call the OT side of the house, or operational technology. A lot of buzzwords around the convergence of IT and OT. How do you bring these OT people kind of alongside you with the IT knowledge and experience that you have?
I it's initially very difficult if you don't have a good working relationship with the operators or the folks that deal with the operational stuff. Um, they're, in my experience, relatively reserved in thinking. They don't think like IT people who think sort of outside the box, so to speak. And I don't mean to disparage anybody. Just that's just from my experiences internally. You see, like in the IT space, budgets are constantly slashed massively. So it's like, how do you do more with less? I mean, obviously, every department is out there because everybody is looking like, how do you save the most amount of money and all that kind of stuff. But you see a bit more, I think, more creativity in large application space on the IT side, because there's typically a lot less folks than you would have on a traditional operational side. And it's sort of showing them that, well, figuring out what the data points are that are important to them, and then showing them how you can give them those data points in a very easy to consume manner. The data points could be, centralized BAS visibility. Maybe you're looking at, temperatures across all of your buildings and your campuses. Give you, for instance, I think the one that really won over our leadership team was the dead of winter here in Chicago. It was, well in the negative degrees with crazy low wind chill. It was the weekend. It was a long weekend, and we were concerned about temperatures. Did somebody leave a classroom window open? Or is the heating system working? Even in unoccupied, is it doing unoccupied heating and just holding the building okay and not going too low? And because we had so many sites at the time cut over to our centralized supervisors, I was able to just trend all the temperatures across all these different buildings and go and say, oh, yeah, there's a room that's like 50 degrees. Let's send somebody to that building to go investigate why that room is that cold, because we're at risk of freezing it out and bursting pipes and things like that. So I think if you could show those tangible things in an easy to consume manner that isn't like IT tough or anything, I always like to look at it as like from the lens of my mom. My mom is probably the least technically savvy person out there. She has a hard time with a smartphone. So everything I try to build within our organization needs to be easy enough for my mom to be able to log into and be able to consume data. And if it's not that simple, it's how can we change it and tweak it so that way it's that easy, and then consistency is also the other thing, and that's a lot of what I've been striving to do with our systems. My running joke for my temperature controls contractors is I love creativity and imagination, just not on my graphics. I want conformity and consistency across the board. I don't need you experimenting on this one site in a different layout, because that's gonna completely mess with my OCD when I look at it. It's got to be exactly consistent with our specifications. So I think those are the big points. And if you have a working relationship, especially if you're from the IT side and you're working with the operations team, on the facility side, it's really building the relationship both personally and professionally with them, and showing them that you're there, you care, you want to help, and you want to make things better. And I think that goes a long way with everybody.
And again, going with that teaching mentality of, I want to convey something simply so that it can be understood, and repeating when necessary.
Correct. Do a lot of repeating
With consistency. Absolutely. Our last topic, and then we'll wrap this podcast. But another thing that you do really, really well is you give constructive feedback, both positive and negative, to partners, vendors, either from a process and procedure standpoint, or even, hey, it would be cool if your system did this, or this feature isn't working for me, which, again, selfishly, we like that because that's, boots on the ground feedback that's highly valuable for us and shapes, what those next features are going to be like when we, go and deploy a new product or a new version. Why do you take such a collaborative approach with everyone, as opposed to just, ticking down the tasks on your massive list of 1,100 plus buildings?
Yeah, I mean, I could pencil whip it all and and just go through, but I liken it more to my experience as a teacher. Of you are even as a teacher, you're always learning, and so you don't learn by just listening. You have to learn by asking questions, and so to expand on that in the IT side of things, I've always found that if you don't know, ask. And if there's something that's not there, ask. Maybe like in the IT side of things, maybe there is a feature when you're sitting through a PowerPoint of whatever new gadget or gizmo is coming out, and you're like, oh, I really like that. I really wish it had this. Well, just ask. Like, hey, like, Tim, you got this thing, this fancy gadget you're trying to sell me. This thing sounds awesome. I don't care about any of this stuff. I care about this other thing, but I need some other stuff that it'll do here. Can you do this for me? Do you guys have it? Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. But I think also, to your point, from a vendor standpoint, I talk to all of my vendors and I ask them, like, this is the direction I'm going. From a organization owner standpoint, what can you do to help support that? What's on the roadmap? Because ultimately, if you have an understanding of like what product is coming out in the next year or two with whatever vendor that you're dealing with or vendors you're dealing with, then that helps you sort of plan. And I try to think about things from like a multi-year standpoint. Like, where are we going to be in 5? Where are we going to be in 10 years? That kind of thing. I joke I have 11 more years to retire, and then I can joke, but we can retire, but we'll see what happens on that. But nothing's going to, like, nobody's going to come up and yell at you because you're asking a question. I mean, they might be like, I don't know, nobody's ever asked us. And I've actually gotten that from, I was talking to the Tritium people themselves, the actual Tritium developers, and I was asking them some questions about role-based access control and Active Directory integration, and they're like, you're the first person who's ever asked us about this. And I was like, I find that astonishing. I mean, you never know. I like asking questions. It's sort of in my personality. But I also like to take a mindset of, let's say you're dealing with somebody who may not be performing, an organization that may not be performing it. There may be other factors to why they're not meeting up to the expectation. And you can't just immediately come in hot. And you got to sort of ask questions to understand why whatever happened and why you got to the place where you're at. And then what can you change to get what you want for better quality or better product or something like that, or better service for the future. And, it's sort of the tact I take.
Well, it's immensely helpful to us. I'm absolutely certain it's helpful for other vendors as well. And so really, in a way, like, the way that you approach the industry and the vendors is really kind of making us all better, and it's making the industry better. And I think then that also helps us go and better serve other people as well. So it's those little acts, Paul, that really make a difference and kind of cause ripples. And that's one of the reasons that I absolutely wanted you to be on our first season of the podcast, because when I think about a building genius, it's like, you're very much a building genius. It doesn't matter that you've only been in controls for 4 years. It's just the way you approach it. And, you ask questions and you try to make other people better, but then your why is also, very right and proper and good to make sure that you're expanding the well-being of those in the space and, those that are around you. So because of that, just thank you. And thank you for being a part of this episode.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Thanks for inviting me. And this has been a blast. I love it.
Well, with that wraps this episode of the Building Geniuses podcast, a production of KMC Controls. If you've enjoyed this conversation, we encourage you to subscribe and share. And if there's anyone that you want to see on our podcast, tag them in the comments or reach out to us on social. We'll tag them in the comments. And as always, we appreciate you listening. And until next time, learn something new, teach someone something, and build your inner genius.